where we were, where we are, and where we're going.
I'm Annette Abercrombie, actually Annette Cook Abercrombie. A lot of people who are my age will know me as. And I want to share some of my memories and the history of the early days of Todd's school. My older sister went to the old Altera school, but my age group were the first ones that actually started here in first grade. And that summer before, we had a little kindergarten, and it was just for 6 weeks. It was a lot of singing, play, and of course we had our time on the carpet where we had a towel and we would lay down and for 20 minutes and listen to music. So then we started school that September, and so we were actually the first class to start and never have gone to Altera and start through Todd. Some of my best memories are our Christmas programs and the May festivals. We always had a May festival and there was a lot of dancing. My first grade was a mixed grade. We had some students from first grade and some that were in second grade in that classroom. And we had what was considered probably by many, what back then a spinster. Her name was Miss Richards. Second grade, I got a teacher that was always really special to me, and her name was Miss Lopez. She was Spanish, and she just seemed to enjoy us so much, and she taught us some Spanish dances, and we learned to sing some Christmas songs in Spanish, and for a long time I could still sing those songs because she had taught us those. Actually, we were the first group of kids to start the West Junior High and never go to Altera also. So we got to break out the brand new schools. West Junior High had sports programs. The boys and the girls teams always did well. It seemed like everybody was very competitive and very skilled, and so when we played other schools it was a pretty good competition, and they won a lot of the ball games we did. My favorite teacher, and the one that really made me want to be a teacher, was Miss Bailey. I thought that I loved history, and I had her for 3 years, and I also had English from her. And I just thought she was so wonderful. She'd gone to Europe after somewhere in her college years, and then she had an adventure. She was born and raised in Ohio, and she came out here to teach. And so even when I went to college and took History 170, there were a lot of things I was like, oh, I remember learning this from Miss Bailey. And my roommate one day, she said, sometimes you don't even study. How do you get such good scores? And I said, I actually remember this stuff from my teacher, Miss Bailey. So I really attribute to her the most that I wanted to be a teacher. I went to Union and graduated, and I went on to college, and I met my husband after about 2 or 3 years, and I decided no more college, and I got married. And the place I ended up back was almost right where I grew up, and my husband's not even a native of Utah. So, however, my kids being in the boundary for Todd, they started to go to school here, and I decided to volunteer as a mother, and I just really enjoyed that. And so I decided, well, you know what, I'll start substituting. And I did that, and then I got a job as the music teacher and as an aide. And a lot of people, too, especially Mr. Summers and Marilyn Martin, said, you know what, you seem to really enjoy this. You know, you've got a lot of college done, go back and finish and do what you want to do. So I did, and I thought I'd never make it because I was so old already, but the time went by and I became a teacher here at, well, it was back at Todd still then. I've gone on still here with the new Eagle View. I've always liked this community and felt like it was my home, and so I've really not had a desire to teach anywhere else. I still love the kids, but I really enjoy it, and I probably will retire here before very long, but this has always been home to me, and I enjoy it. It's a great community.
Okay, my name is Forrest Kutch. I was born and raised here in the Uintah Basin. I attended public schools, Todd Elementary, West Junior High School, 1 year at Union High School. Then I left the area to attend a private school. I have very fond memories of the elementary school, Todd Elementary. I remember my first teacher, her name was Miss Richards, and we always called her Old Lady Richards. She was very strict, very firm with us. And when you're a kid, you don't understand that. You tend to judge a person as being mean or something, when in fact they're just trying to do their jobs. And working with children is always a challenge. And she was that way, but she was the ultimate professional teacher, because she really did teach us a lot, and she just didn't put up with any nonsense, and so she demanded good behavior in the classroom, and if you didn't respect that, you learned quickly to respect it. But in the end, I have very fond memories. I think she influenced me the most of all the elementary teachers. At Todd, I remember the Ossams, and Miss Guzman and Miss Rollins. These were good teachers. These were good people. The festivals, the freshman frolic at West Junior High School bring back fond memories. It was kind of an interesting school because it was about 50-50 Indian and non-Indian in attendance, and we all pretty much got along. There wasn't a race barrier. In fact, I never really felt any racial tension until I got into junior high school, and then it was very subtle, very covert, not overt. I think any of the racial tensions mostly existed on the east side of Uintah School District, having to do with school policy and politics. But as far as the west side schools, both Todd and West Junior High School, the teachers did the best they could.
My name's Kathleen Chiga, and Larry has asked me to just think about my time as an educator, and as I was going to school, I'm going to Todd School, West Junior High. Todd School was a school that was built with the Native American students and the Caucasian students. I always thought it was a hoping that we could mesh and we could become working partners. And there was something about that group of students that I met: Larry Sesbuch, Vivian Cyrich, Marjorie Anchor-Pont, Forrest Kutch, Carlos Reed, Joseph Pennycoos, Louise Ridley. For some reason, we just had that, we're going to do just as well and better. And it was proving to the white students, yeah, there was no difference between the you learner and the white learner. But it seemed like the teachers back then were there to teach. They weren't there and looking at students like, oh, they're Native Americans, they're Utes, they're whites, they're, I think they taught to the skill of the student. They pushed students as far as a student would go, and even to where they challenged the student. Todd School was special too because we had three visiting, well, I remember the 3 Hawaiian teachers. One was a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Ossan, and one was, might have been a friend or relative, Mrs. Guzman. And every spring they had, we had festivals, spring festivals, and we had winter festivals. And in the spring festival, they were Hawaiian. One year they kind of geared the theme to that blue Hawaii. And I was one of the princesses. I remember Linda Pauini and LeGrand Redfoot as the king and queen. And Connie Murray and myself were the flower girls, I guess, sort of. And then they had the islands represented by different individuals. And then we had, the classrooms all chose a Hawaiian dance or song. And the parents got into it. The family got involved. The communities got involved. The final day of the program, the lawn was lined up with parents and community. And in the winter festival, we chose a theme. And I remember the Winter Wonderland. I always remember Ronald Norcho skating. And each classroom chose a winter activity or something, a song or dance. And again, the families participated, and slowly the schools began to think, oh, there's no time for all these activities. There's no time to spend. We're wasting time. But you know, that socializing, that getting the parents, getting the community, that was the education part of learning too. And I don't see that in the schools very much anymore. Academics is just not the only learning that takes place at the school. Todd's school was special also in that it drew in these other communities like White Rocks. They closed their school. It drew in LaPointe and Tridale. Gusher came to our school. Randlett, Fort Duchesne. I don't know how far west, I think through Ballard anyway. I don't remember much discrimination. Oh, there were remarks, and like I said, some, you know, I always felt a little bit from my own people than I did the others. But I don't remember the outright bullying, the outright name calling, the outright that made students not want to come to school. It was just a special school, and I will always remember, I think I learned the most academically at Todd School than I have at any other school. Then we went to West Junior High. That was just a continuing of the same students that I had gone to school with at Todd. I knew I was capable of learning, which we all were. It's just that we grew up differently and we learned different things. I always wanted to be a teacher, and I think Todd School was always where I wanted to be. Luckily, I was able to get a job with the Uintah School District, and I taught first grade for 2 years, and then I went into special education. I went to the University of Utah and graduated in 1996 with my master's degree in education. And then I felt like I had accomplished pretty much the goals, educational goals I had set for myself, except I got into the intern administrative certificate and then became the principal here for 1 year.
My name's Tina Daniels. I went to school at Todd and West starting in the 2nd grade. My children went to school at Todd and West, and I have taught at Todd/Eagle View for 16 years. I started as a music teacher, then the librarian, and I've been in the classroom for 6 years teaching 7th and 8th grade. I loved Todd and West. Absolutely loved it. I haven't been to one of my high school reunions, but I would go anywhere for a West Junior High 9th grade reunion. Those are my fondest memories. And that is one of the reasons I fought so hard for these schools, is because I wanted my children to have that same wonderful experience that I had going to Todd and West. And you know, I wouldn't change it for anything. It was my best school memories are right here. And that's what I tell my students. I said, I went here, and I know your parents, your grandparents, I know them. I went to school with them, and it was a wonderful experience. We had the freshman frolic, our 9th grade dance. I remember the band class, the music, and we actually at that time got invited to go play for Vernal. We had such a good music program. I remember Gail Herbert, of course, in the office. She ran the place, kept it together. If it wasn't for Gail, I don't know. But Gail also knew and loved the kids, and she knew their individual circumstances, and she knew, you know, she cared for them enough that she was there for them, and they knew that. And that was awesome. I remember Mr. Jorgensen in the library and his photography classes and being on the yearbook staff. At that time we had football, we had basketball, volleyball, cheerleading, drill team, the whole thing. I was student body president my 9th grade year. That was a lot of fun to do that and interact with the kids. Oh, Mr. Coleman and Mr. Davis. Guy Coleman and Ace Davis. I remember their classes. Ace Davis had a totalitarian government class, and I remember he made us dress in white shirts and Levi's, and we had to memorize the law, and if we didn't, no curly hair, no nothing. And if we broke the rule, then his wrestlers would, you know, they were his police. And you'd go out and shovel gravel into a little can, and then one day we overthrew him, and a bunch of his wrestlers tackled him and stuffed him in the trash can. And that was his overthrowing the government, but that was his way of teaching us about the totalitarian government. I've never forgot it. It was great. It was a great lesson. They were so excited, and you know, Guy Coleman, he never fell asleep in his class because he was up and down the aisles, and if he was telling you about history and somebody got shot, then he'd fall on the floor. And probably those two that I talked about, and Mr. Woolard, he was a good math teacher. He was my 6th grade teacher, and then he moved up and went through West, and so I think those were probably very instrumental in me becoming a teacher. And then coming back, after I got married, I came back and I substituted here at Todd and at West, and being in the classroom with the kids again, and actually taught with Mr. Woolard. You know, some of the teachers were still here, and that's when I kind of said, you know, I kind of like this. And I always knew that this is where I wanted to teach. I didn't want to teach anywhere else. I wanted to teach at Todd or West or Eagleview once it became Eagleview. This is just home to me. You know, I've had other people call and say, hey, no, these are my kids. This is where I stay.
One of the things we learned is that our students are mostly right-brained. We're not really a scientific people. We operate mostly in the arts and in the healing arts, and then later on we transition to scientific learning. It's not that we can't be high-tech people. It's just that a majority of our people lean more in those fields. We'll always have about 10 or 15% of our kids that do well in math and science, but the majority of our people are in the other areas. I always felt that, in fact, I was one of the few that supported us having our own school district, because I was hoping to influence the policy to change the curriculum to make it more conducive to our students, but that didn't work out. So, and I wanted our people to have a greater say, a greater voice in education. We've never really had a voice in the school system. I don't think we've had one person elected to the school board, and that's very unfortunate. So we need to work on that. I'll just say the first superintendent, he was very old school. In fact, he was back in the antebellum days, because he really didn't think too much of Native people. He was very prejudiced, narrow-minded, and he basically was one of the people who influenced policy to keep most of the money on the east side of the school district. He was one of the people, and also his successors, who constantly discriminated against our students by encouraging the best teachers to stay on the east side and sending the less productive teachers to the west side. That did happen. That did occur. One of the things we did that made a big difference, I think, or contributed to improvement, was we learned about teacher training programs that were being operated by various tribes throughout the country to try to improve education. They were contracting with colleges and universities to educate and train teachers for schools attended by Indian students. We were successful in getting a grant under the Department of Education. We first contracted with Brigham Young University's elementary school program, college program of education, and they did a good job. In fact, over the 5-year period, we were able to graduate 8 of 10 students, and that was the highest achievement rate in the nation. And so that was a wonderful program. Of the 8 trainees, I think about 6 of them stayed in or entered the public schools locally, and most of them are now retired. I don't know if all 6 stayed to retirement, but most of them did accomplish a long career here in the schools. And having Indian role models in the classroom did a lot to help our students. My own son benefited greatly. He speaks highly of Mrs. Thompson, Gloria Thompson. She had a married name, Aragart, but he always called her Teacher Thompson, and she taught him a lot and inspired him. So she was one of the Indian teachers trained in our teacher training program. So that was one of our accomplishments. We also started up the Johnson O'Malley program, which was discontinued before I got on board. We started it up again, and we hired teacher aides to provide some tutoring assistance in the schools. I think that program has continued to this day. But I will have to say that Eagleview Middle School has made some changes. The Uintah School District has, my understanding, made some commitments to upgrade the program, and there are some results to show that the students are doing better, and I'm happy about that. But again, I have to say this, the teachers that did come to the west side, they did the best they could. And some of them, in fact, were some of the best teachers in spite of that attitude. We still had good teachers. So in the end, I have fond memories, and I feel that I received an adequate education, in some areas a superior education, because some of my classmates and peers have gone on and done well in this life. They've accomplished great things.
I've been involved with the school since forever. As soon as my children started, then I became a member of the PTA. Chris White and Shar Padilla grabbed Virginia and I, and we became part of the PTA, and so we've been involved in the school since then. We've seen lots of things. If you're going to look at the history of Todd and West and Eagleview, you have to go back to when it was Todd and West before LaPointe Elementary was built. When they built LaPointe Elementary and took those students, then West was still the school for those students to come get down to for their secondary education. As we looked back in the history, we tried to find where that changed, where the school district made a specific decision to bus Tridell and LaPointe to Vernal. We couldn't find that, but somehow that started to happen. And so students started to be pulled away from West. And with the declining population, it started to lose programs, started to lose opportunities for the students, because the money follows, the WPU follows the student. And so that's kind of when the struggle started, especially for West, to keep afloat, to keep programs going. Todd saw some of that as more students left West. then and went to Vernal, more students pulled out and decided to go to Roosevelt, and that caused a further trickle and decline of students for programs. At some point, the school district, I believe, was offered to the tribe at one, but the school here was offered to the tribe at one point to see if they wanted to run it. We, at one point, the people from Tridel and La Pointe and what we called the crossovers, those that were going to Roosevelt to school, approached the commissioners and the school board with a plan, new boundaries, and they wanted to give Todd and West to Duchesne School District and draw a boundary that just across the river, I believe, and would send all the rest to Vernal. And we, Gloria Thompson, Maxine Natchez, Jay Groves was instrumental. We went out into the communities and we did, we had them sign petitions saying that they were against it. We took it to the school board. That wasn't enough. We had to actually have a vote here at the school, and we fought to have it just those that would be impacted, those that would be moved to Duchesne School District got to vote to say whether we wanted that or not. And the overwhelming vote was that no, we wanted to stay in Uintah School District. We just wanted them to take care of us. So there's been a big struggle with Todd and West and getting support from the Uintah School District. And at times we had, really good people on the board that did their best to try and support us, Dr. Nelson, Dr. Spenlove, to name a few. But at other times it was a real struggle to get what we needed here for our students and to keep our schools. We just wanted to keep our schools. Duchesne District at one time jumped in and they wanted extra money for what they called the crossovers that were going into their schools, K through 8. And it became a very big issue with the union contract, and they weren't going to renew it if they didn't get more money for the crossovers. And we didn't feel like we should send anything over and above the WPU and the state formula that was already in place. So that became a battle back and forth, all about the same time. So it was a real struggle. We've gained more and more support from the district, and they have made decisions that have helped us to get where we are today. One of those was to build the new school. And I remember I was on a committee to go around and visit other schools, and they were going to prioritize repairs and different things that needed to be done so that they could do a vote and get the money to do that from the community. So I went around, and there were some real needs in the Vernal area. The two schools over there were not safe. And they had also prioritized, once they built the two new schools, that they would make improvements to Todd and to West and fix those because there were some structural issues. Todd had been built and West built in the 50s, and there was, just lots of structural issues. Well, once they got the new schools built, they had a meeting and they were not going to make the improvements to Todd and West. And they had a meeting in the community, members showed up. And I can remember that meeting very well, and we weren't happy. And I told them, I said, I served on that committee, and I promised the people, they told me, Tina, they won't do it. They'll fix the schools in Vernal, and they won't fix ours. And I said, no, they won't. They promised that that wouldn't happen, that we would get the repairs that we needed. And I said, now you're doing exactly what I told them you wouldn't do. But I remember, and they listened, and I remember the change came when Annette Abercrombie told them, you have built those schools in Vernal twice since you have built Todd and West. We were built in the 50s. You've built those other schools twice. And you could see the shift. And when they went to break, one of the members told me, you're going to get your school. And that was a real changing point in their support for us. I felt like we got the new school, and since then, a lot of the things that have happened before, years ago, they would punish teachers by sending them to Todd. If you're not good, that's where you're going to have to go. And we got a new superintendent, and I remember telling him that, and he didn't believe me. After he'd been here for a year, he actually apologized to me in a meeting, and he said the dance of the lemons will stop. He went back, he looked into it, and did research, and there had been some of that going on. So it's been really nice to see the support from the district for our school and for our students. And not, as a parent, I spent so much time Duchesne School District meetings, Uintah School District meetings, a whole group of us did, just trying to secure an education in these schools for our students, just to keep our schools here and not have them given away or closed down or, you know, whatever. It's been so nice the past, you know, few years not to have to do that, to be able to feel secure in the education of our children here on the west side of Uintah County. And it's such a good feeling at this school. With the building of the new school, we actually kind of had a funeral for the failing schools. We had flowers and we just said, we're getting rid of that. That's going away, that's no more. And we're going to move ahead in a positive direction. And we have, and we've seen great growth, and the community has rallied around, and it's been great. You hear the phrase, think outside the box. I've said since I started, you know, teaching here and working here, I don't think we even have a box. This staff and Mr. Sturmer's done great things for the school as well. You know, he's a good leader, and the staff is always willing to jump in. You know, if something comes along and if we feel like it's going to benefit our students, then they're right there and we just jump in and we do it. And it's such a positive, you know, feeling and love for the students with most of the staff. You know, we do have a turnover, they come and they go, but teachers come and usually it's, wow. You know, it's not like that at every school. They said, you don't understand, it's not like that at every school. You know, and so I think that is one of the greatest things here is the staff and how we pull together and work together with each other for the kids.